Hello, good morning to everyone, or good afternoon rather, because it's now 12 on the nose. And thank you so much for joining us today. I am Maria Bleasdell, Partner Relations and Communications Manager at ACCA Caribbean. Again, thanks so much for joining us for this wonderful initiative between ACCA and the Barbados Chamber of Commerce. We have quite a panel of experts this morning, and just before we get started, I would like to go through some of our house rules. So just bear with me 1 second. Okay, so here we are. Hopefully you should be able to see my house rules. Very simple. Please mute your microphones in order to reduce noise interference. Use the question box that you should see in the gray control panel to the right of your screen. You can type in there any questions that you have for the presenters, and we will take them following the presentations. The training will last for just about 2 hours, so we expect to be completed around 2 p.m. We appreciate your feedback at the end of today's session. So you will be getting a survey at the end. And just a reminder that this session is being recorded, and you will get a copy of the recording following the session, just about 5 working days. That's it for me for now. And it is my great pleasure to introduce our moderator. This is just a look at our program, Mrs. Tricia Tannis, who is the immediate past president of the Barbados Chamber of Commerce. She is also the Chief Executive Officer of Unicommerce Barbados Limited and the first female chairman of the Barbados Private Sector Association. Tricia, I would like to hand over to you.
Thank you and good morning. First, let me confirm that I can be heard fairly clearly. Maria, can you hear me?
Hearing you loud and clear.
Excellent. Thank you. A fantastic welcome to everyone who's joined us this morning. We're told that for this webinar organized by ACCA and BCCI, Barbados Chamber of Commerce and Industry, we have over 800 persons who have registered to engage with us today or to access this webinar content. And I think I just want to give a hearty round of applause to both organizations for being able to engage at such a high level across the Caribbean. Fantastic. Well, thank you again for joining us for today's session, hosted again by both the ACCA Caribbean and the Barbados Chamber of Commerce and Industry, and we are in for a fantastic 2 hours. Very, very riveting discussion, future-proofing business for success through sustainability, and I can hardly wait to hear the lineup of very competent persons in our panel that you will hear in due time. I won't go over who I am. I'm Tricia Tannis, and you have just heard my immediate roles, and I'm sure that we're just going to be very, very anxious to jump right into today's session. So again, the topic and the broader topic is future-proofing business for success through sustainability. And it is being jointly hosted again by our two sponsors, ACCA, BCCI, and the specific theme today that we're engaging on is rethinking sustainable business, rethinking sustainable business. And so it gives me great pleasure to introduce our first speaker, Ms. Shelly-Ann Mohammed, the head of ACCA Caribbean, responsible for the development and implementation of strategy for the Caribbean. Shelly-Ann has an MBA and Master's in Global Business Studies, specializing in emerging markets at Oxford University and Said Business School. She's an attorney by profession with a Bachelor of Laws honors from the University of Connecticut School of Law and a Master's in Law specializing in the U.S. Corporate and Securities Law. She was the president and founder of the Association of Caribbean Corporate Counsel Limited, which promoted the professional and business interests of corporate and in-house counsel in the Caribbean. Today, Shelly-Ann will be giving brief opening remarks on behalf of ACCA Caribbean. Over to you, Shelly.
Thank you, Tricia. Can you hear me properly?
Definitely.
Okay, great. So good afternoon, everyone. I am Shelly Mohammed, as Trisha introduced me, head of ACCA Caribbean. I would maybe, hopefully know some of you, but I'm certain that I don't know all of you. So I look forward to today's session and hoping to get to know more of you over the next over today and the next few months and coming year. And I hope that wherever you are, whether in Barbados or Trinidad or elsewhere, that COVID-19 and the situation that we find ourselves in is not too bad, and that I know we're all struggling to survive and get through this time, and we all pray and hope that everyone is fine and healthy, and that we all look forward to a new normal one day soon. So welcome to the second annual joint ACCA BCCI webinar. This activity forms part of our responsibilities as outlined in an MOU which we signed with BCCI in March 2020. We again are pleased to provide the platform to build the finance and professional skills of both the BCCI membership and ACCI membership region-wide. ACCA recognizes that SMEs are considered the backbone of Caribbean economies and growth. The last 17 months has been particularly challenging for small businesses across the globe due to the impact of the pandemic, and of course in the Caribbean very much so. As such, learning and development opportunities such as this create an avenue for business owners and finance professionals alike to hear from sustainability experts and adapt to the changing landscape to better survive in the midst of this crisis. ACCA's brand theme for the period August to October is Rethinking Sustainable Business. During this period, we have focused on three key objectives. One, to position professional accountants as vital in driving positive change. Two, to ensure that our members and future members are fully equipped to take action. And three, to show that ACCA cares. Professional accountants are at the heart of decision-making and strategy, playing a critical role in developing credible and resilient businesses that drive long-term values in ways that are more meaningful than before. They are the guardians of information, integrity, and ethics. They also have a central role in developing, applying, and assuring fast evolving reporting and auditing standards on value and sustainability. As a leader in the profession, we are acutely aware of our responsibilities to our employees, our students, our members, and to the wider community. That's why sustainability continues to be at the heart of our strategy, and why we are committed to events such as this that will reach target audiences such as yourselves. Through partnerships such as the one with BCCI, we are here to navigate this emerging and evolving sustainability landscape, to provide you with practical insights, tools, learning skills, and connections to confidently lead the changes required to drive positive and sustainable business performance. ACCA's sustainability campaign is all about rethinking our approaches, and it sets out 5 calls to action for our whole connected community to create a more sustainable world. We encourage you to improve your sustainability skills by committing to developing your understanding of sustainable business landscape and integrated thinking, continue upskilling by completing CPD, engaging with our research and policy initiatives, and visiting our Rethinking Sustainable Business Hub on the ACCA Global website, to include sustainability in decision making, where you can act for your organization to be society and earth positive, use integrated thinking, understand your dependencies, and take steps to reduce your negative impact, to historically report on sustainability, where you can encourage your organization to report on all environmental, social, and governance ESG impacts, drive forward integrating reporting and integrated thinking. You can join the big conversation, organizing, for example, a big climate change conversation event in your organization, business, or club in which you are a member. Become a sustainable business champion and help to change your world by taking small steps at home or at work towards a more sustainable world. Collectively, we can make a big impact. Over the next few months, we will continue with our sustainability themed events, articles, reports, and development launches. We will be sharing stories from members from across the world, playing a role in driving positive change. On the 22nd of September, we conducted our first roundtable with management and council members of the ACCA Joint Scheme Partners, the Institutes of Barbados, Belize, Guyana, and Jamaica, on the subject of digital transformation and sustainability, putting people at the core of digital transformation strategies. The key regional views recorded will be integrated in an incoming report on transformational journeys, finance, and the agile organization, which is scheduled for release in November. In spite of, or possibly because of coronavirus, our teams continue to be hard at work, ensuring that the needs of our members and students are met. And even within these unprecedented times, our professional insights team continues to research and develop technical papers like climate change, risk-related disclosures in extractive companies, ethics for sustainable AI adoption, connecting AI and ESG, and auditing the pandemic, transparency, accountability, and inclusiveness of the use of emergency funding for COVID-19. These are publicly available on the ACCA Global website under the Professional Insights tab. Our work in the Caribbean continues apace, with a host of activities and events scheduled within the next few months. These include our virtual annual members conference, which is on the 21st of October, our new members and FCCA recognition ceremonies in November, our first regional virtual high school conference in December, our first regional virtual universities conference in January 2022, and our virtual annual public sector conference in February 2022. So, as you can tell, there's a lot going on behind the scenes at our Caribbean office. Therefore, before I close, let me once again thank you for taking the time to join us. Thank you as well to our partner BCCI for their invaluable collaboration on this event and for seeking the interest of its membership on this very important topic. It is my hope that you not only find the content relevant and helpful, but you also take all the opportunities to participate fully and engage in the discussion. And as always, we're here for any questions after the session, or even anytime you want to get more involved on the sustainability side, or you wish to have any access to any of our data and insights and research, please do reach out to one of our team members. Thank you, everyone, once again, and have a good session today. Back over to you.
Thank you so much, Shelley, for setting the tone, for our session today, and certainly throwing out the mandate for fellow accountants, essentially, to be joining to join part of the big conversations. Lots of big conversations happening about sustainability, and certainly a lot of other evolving big conversations as it relates to diversity and climate change and impact under the broader umbrellas of sustainability. She also challenged accountants to be agents and proponents of change. I certainly wholeheartedly recommend and support that thrust and that call. She's also, reached out and asked members to take action and certainly be part and be relevant, essentially, to the society and the evolving conversations around them. So thank you so much, Shelley, for setting the tone of today's session. Up next, we have another exciting speaker, the Executive Director of the Barbados Chamber of Commerce, Mrs. Misha Lawbon-Clark. Misha is a management and communications specialist with 25 years experience in management, corporate governance, corporate communications, public relations, stakeholder engagement, and media relations. She assumed the role of Executive Director of the Barbados Chamber of Commerce and Industry in June 2019. And may say a little personal plug here. Essentially, she came on when I also was the president of the chamber, and we worked fantastically together. And she essentially had responsibility and has responsibility for managing the overall operations and leading the strategic direction of the chamber. The Barbados Chamber of Commerce is one of the oldest private sector associations and organizations in Barbados, probably even the Caribbean, that exists to promote the interests of the diverse business community through advocacy and representation, business development, support, membership engagement, and trade facilitation. The Chamber's goal is to help local businesses prosper and grow by facilitating a more enabling business environment in Barbados and the CARICOM single market. She previously held the position of Chief Executive Officer of the Institute of Chartered Accountants of the Caribbean for a period of 10 years. Misha, over to you. Welcome, and we look forward to your remarks.
Thank you, Tricia. It's a pleasure to have you moderating this session this afternoon, and good afternoon to our participants online and to our panelists. And I'd also like to recognize Shelly Mohammed and the team at ACCA. We at the Barbados Chamber of Commerce and Industry, we are really delighted to partner with the ACCA to bring attention to this important subject of building sustainable businesses for the future. The link between education, upskilling, which ACCA offers, and business support, which is part of the Chamber's mandate, is critical to the growth and development of the economies of our region. The role of the private enterprise in building a more sustainable future for all in line with the 2030 Sustainable Development Goals is still a matter for ongoing discussion. The traditional view has been that companies simply should exist to make money for shareholders, but though profitability will always be a key determinant of business success, it is becoming very clear that companies must place an emphasis on environmental protection and the development of people within the communities in which they operate. And this is critical to ensuring their success in the future. In fact, John Elkington, and he is a lead specialist and authority on the role of corporate responsibility and sustainable development. He calls the move away from the single bottom line approach, which is profit, to a triple bottom line agenda encompassing the 3 Ps: profit, people, and planet. And this calls for a concerted collaboration, or what we call an inclusive approach among businesses to ensure their sustainability, and the sustainability of our economies in this new COVID pandemic era. The discussion around the sustainability of businesses has significantly been heightened because of the COVID-19 pandemic. And businesses are now defined as going concerns, which means that there is an expectation that they will have the resources to continue operating indefinitely. However, the pandemic has significantly impacted the resources of many businesses, and we know that for a fact. As the Chamber of Commerce, with our 204 members across diverse sectors of the Barbados economy, many businesses have had to significantly reduce the prospect of survival for many going into the future. The global push towards the focus on sustainability is really a major plank, as I mentioned earlier, in the development model for small island developing states like Barbados. And this continues to gain momentum. Barbados, like many countries around the globe, has adopted the 17 Sustainability Development Goals, SDGs, of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, which was adopted by world leaders in September 2015 at a UN summit. And over the next 15 years, with these new goals that universally apply to all, countries will have to mobilize efforts to end all forms of poverty, fight inequalities, tackle climate change, while ensuring that no one is left behind. A focus on the achievement of these goals is also driving the creation of new economic sectors, which build more resilient economies, promote the development of green businesses, and enhance social transformation through a focus on people, the environment, and prosperity for all. As a trusted voice of the business community since 1825, the Barbados Chamber has sought to provide its members with that focused leadership and a strong platform to promote their interests. And that voice often manages and facilitates tough conversations as we're doing today. We also seek to monitor the pulse of the business community and to cater to the needs of our members, as Tricia in our introduction said. Our recently launched 3-year strategic plan places emphasis, among other key strategies, on supporting our members in building resilient and sustainable businesses, which of course is critical to ensuring a strong business ecosystem in Barbados. And it's against this background that the Chamber is really keen to engage on the sustainability agenda. And through partnerships like this with the ACCA, we can ensure that our members are better enabled and inspired to lead and join the sustainability movement. We look forward to the ideas that will emerge from this important dialogue today. And in closing, I really wish to thank ACCA for their partnership in hosting today's session. And this session is in the spirit of the spirit of which is captured in the MOU that we signed together, well, in 2019. And we just want to wish you, the participants online, a very beneficial session, and also thank the panel of experts for the perspective and insights that they will share today. I thank you.
Thank you, Misha. Those are very invaluable opening remarks, which reminded us of today's focus on sustainable business practices and future-proofing companies. In particular, what was very interesting was that she highlighted that there's a shift away from the focus on 1P, which is profit, into a focus now on multiple Ps, most notably profit, people, and planet. I think those are very, very profound comments, which I'm sure essentially we're going to come back to in our panel discussion and comments later on as we go into the depth of our presentation. So thank you very much, Misha, for very profoundly reminding us of the broader accountability that we in the business space are bound to deliver and to be engaging around. Our next speaker is Dr. Emily Dick-Ford. She'll be speaking to us on creating a roadmap to sustainability. Dr. Emily Dick-Ford is the Deputy Campus Principal of the University of the West Indies Open Campus. She is a corporate responsibility expert with a PhD in accounting, specifically social and environmental reporting, from the University of Dundee, Scotland in 2001. She's a certified professional accountant with CPA Canada and a fellow of the Society of FCPA and FCMA. She has worked as an accounting academic for over 30 years, 17 of those years with the UWI Cave Campus Management Studies from 1991 to 2007, and serving as facilitator for CPA Canada programs in the Caribbean up to 2014. At the UWI Cave Hill campus, she served as acting head of management department studies for 2 one-year periods, and as deputy dean for distance and outreach for the Faculty of Social Sciences at the Cave Hill campus from 2001 to 2003. For 2.5 years, Emily served as a government senator and Minister of Planning, Housing and the Environment in the government of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago, 2007-2010. And I asked her, I told her before I was going to add one more thing to her bio, which was that she also happened to have taught me at UWI, and I think I would feature very prominently in her bio, but unfortunately I wasn't. So I'm going to humbly accept that she's done much more important things over the course of her career, and happily hand over to you, Dr. Emily Dick-Ford, on creating a roadmap to sustainability.
Thank you so much, Tricia. Next time, I need to fix my bio, certainly. Good morning, everyone. And thank you to ACCA and BCCI for hosting this very, very important topic and this very important webinar. And I truly hope that so far, I think I saw 402 attendees. I truly hope that the 402 attendees here will really take away what I would call a challenge and a call to action, because this is more than just a passing, this is not a fad, and I'll explain that as I go along. So I want to thank ACCA and BCCI again, and especially to thank Ms. Mohammed as well as Misha for truly framing the context for this conversation. And I want to say welcome also to my fellow panelists. I was asked to speak on the subtopic. So the overall topic is future-proofing business for success through sustainability. And my subtopic is creating a roadmap to sustainability. Now, it is very, very important that we understand that that there are a lot of issues in this. I want to get some of these things off of my screen. There are a lot of issues underlying this topic, and I'm going to kind of dig into your topic a little bit more than you probably intended, but I have to. So creating a roadmap to sustainability. And I'm asking the question, what is the issue for correction and why? Because if you're talking about a roadmap, it means you want to get to somewhere and it must be for a reason. So I'm going to begin by looking at the Intergovernmental Panel for Climate Change, their 6th assessment report, which was recently released, and share with you 6 messages for the Caribbean. And the overall message is that we are at a code red alert. So why are we talking about sustainability? Why are we seeking a roadmap to sustainability for business? It is because there is a looming crisis. And in fact, some people say it's not looming, it's here. So I'm going to look at the IPCC's 6th assessment report. And those 6 messages come from Dr. Colin Young from the Caribbean Community Climate Change Center in Belize that serves CARICOM. Now, the webinar suggests, the title suggests future-proofing business for success with sustainability as a tool. And I want to challenge us that sustainability is the goal and resilience building is the focus. Resilience building calls for a mind shift, and I'll show that in a little bit. Future-proofing and success for business must be seen as shared benefits, shared with the rest of society and the rest of our fellow humans, not just in our community, but the world over. Because climate change is an anthropogenic event. It happens mainly because of human activity, and it is human activity all over the world, not just in your local community. So future proofing is just, that is like subset of resilience building. Resilience building is the focus, and I'll talk about that briefly. And how are we to correct these things? How are we to get on that roadmap to sustainability, or that road? And there are solutions which have been developing for decades. You know, people think this is something that's new. It is far from new. In 1995, I went to the University of Dundee to do my PhD in social and environmental accounting. And that's the beginning. That's what you're seeing down there, SEA, and then you see CSR and so on. Those are the foundation. I shouldn't even say foundation. Those were the early days, but not the first. The early days of thinking through the challenge of business and the environment. And so there are a number of solutions that have evolved over the decades, and the evolution can be captured. This is not like the perfect, accurate approach, but certainly I give you a timeline here. Social and environmental accounting, and I cannot say 30 years ago, I think it's like 40 years ago. Then corporate social responsibility, captured by ISO 26000, the international standards. It's a guideline standard, 26,000. And then ESG, which a lot of people talk about now, the environment, social, and governance disclosure, that seems to be a fad, but it's not a fad. It comes on the foundation of social and environmental accounting, corporate social responsibility. We also have a sustainability accounting standards board in the making out of IFAC, the International Federation of Accountants. And the really big issue, and I think this is where what you would call the end game, if you are an Avengers fan, it's the end game: circular business and circular economy. So I'll talk a bit about these. So I'm changing my screen, but it's not taking me on. Right. So quickly, this IPCC's sixth assessment report and 6 messages for the Caribbean. And Dr. Colin Young said that there are 6 takeaways from this intergovernmental panel on climate change. And I don't know if you're aware, but it's something to go and look up. The IPCC has been driving the United Nations agenda for the climate change conversations and decisions and so on around over the years. And it's a very important body that provides us with strong scientific support and evidence that we do have a challenge. And as you see there, those words, act now. So the world must act now to help developing countries. We are in developing countries. So I want to tell you the 6, just share with you, and you can find this on LinkedIn. You can find this on the 5Cs website, 5Cs being the Caribbean Community Climate Change Center out of Belize. And the 6 areas that he pulled out with 6 messages for our region. And this is critical because we have to understand, why do we need a roadmap to sustainability? And what really must be our posture, what must be our mindset? So the world is on track to reach 1.5 degrees temperature threshold by 2040, with devastating implications for the Caribbean states. And I know that we would have witnessed some terrible hurricanes, like 3 in a row. I think it's 2017 or 2019. And when they talk about devastating implications, it means that it's worse than what we've seen before. Now, climate change impacts are global, but some regions, like the Caribbean, will experience an increasing and co-occurring number of extreme weather-related disasters. And we've seen it, as I said, one after the next, Maria and 2 others, right, one after the next, hitting small islands and really devastating. 3, our oceans are rising, they're becoming hotter, more acidic, and that affects a number of sectors that are key for business and enterprise in our region. And there's no time for delay. Global action, and remember, this is not action by any one state or any one region. It is global action that is required. And all these emphases that you see here came straight from the 5 Cs. It is required now. And some changes are already locked in. For example, sea level rise, acidification, melting of glaciers. These things have already started. And as such, CARICOM must ramp up adaptation measures. And I want to challenge that a little bit to say, now, adaptation is, how do we cope? And what do we do to ensure that we are not totally wiped out and have to go and find somewhere else to live? But not only should we be ramping up adaptation, we should also take active part in mitigation as well, which is, how do we also ensure that we are contributing to low carbon or net zero? We cannot only be adapting, we must be a part of the solution as well. And human actions are unequivocally responsible for the rapidly changing climate, resulting in increasing and intensifying climate-related hazards. So in short, there's a creeping and worsening existential crisis spotlighted by the IPCC's assessment report. And the crisis is real, increasingly more pervasive, and changes the risks of doing business in our region, to the extent that new ways of thinking and new business models, sustainable business models, are needed. So it is more than just a roadmap, and it is more than just taking it on board. It is actually having a total transformation. So the substance of sustainability, it must be both inclusive and environmentally sound. And notice, environmentally sound is about protecting the environment, reducing greenhouse gas emissions, and all of the other things that relate to that we need for a climate smart approach to doing business. But that is linked to the social issues as well. We must be reducing poverty, because sometimes in poverty, and in fact, a lot of times, and in a lot of regions in poverty, we find that environmental degradation is a part of survival. And so you have to solve all of the issues at the same time. So environmentally sound, reduce poverty. Yes, hello?
Thank you so much. I'm going to just ask you to just wind down your very
come to a close. Yes.
To a close, but
yes.
I want.
So I'm going to go.
Let's stick a pin right here because we're going to
Yeah.
come back to our panel discussion. Very riveting, but thank you so much.
Okay, so I'm going to stop here, and I just want to read this last piece, that businesses pursuing the sustainable development goals must take a posture of being just and fair in our treatment to current and future generations, especially for the most vulnerable and for the natural environment. So thank you, and I look forward to the questions and so on later. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Emily. We are definitely sticking a pin here where she has left off the substance of sustainability. And we are going to definitely have to come back to that in our panel discussion a little later. But we are, for now, going to move on to our next speaker, who is Mr. Philip Julian. He's the Managing Director of New Gen Energy Limited. And he's speaking to us today on maximizing opportunities from sustainable transition. After working in the Canadian engineering consulting sector, Philip returned to Trinidad in 2001, and since then he has been integrally involved in project development and consulting activities in the local energy sector. Mr. Julian led the development of KenSys Green Limited, taking the helm of this pioneering entity in the energy transition industry to establish renewable and low carbon-based energy projects in Trinidad and Tobago and the region. Welcome, Mr. Julian. We're excited to hear your presentation on maximizing opportunities from sustainable transition.
Thank you very much, Tricia, and good afternoon to everyone. Keeping some very special company with the opening presenters. There's so much resonance in what they're saying to where we are at in what KenSys Green is in service of. And before I dive into it, I just want to make sure that everybody is seeing the slide presentation. I will take that as a yes unless someone says otherwise. So
yes, we can.
Great. So again, thanks for the opportunity. I will be as brief as I can, and feel free to interrupt me if I go long, because when I get passionate about a topic, I tend to go a little bit longer than the organizers would like me to. But I think we can get it covered in 10 minutes. So very much here, speaking from the capacity, not only as a Trinbagonian, but as a member of CARICOM. And the first area of focus that I want to share with you is the New Gen project, which you may or may not have heard about. I think it's important to set that as the context as we get into the presentation, because I think it's a really exciting example of what we're talking about here today. This is a project that has arisen out of both economical challenge and an environmental challenge, which the New Gen project has been designed to really enable a win-win opportunity to arise out of. I'm going to share it with everyone because it will give a business-specific focus of how the sustainable future can or could look for CARICOM, particularly in the energy sphere. And then as I'll continue, I'll talk a little bit about KenSys Green and how we have our own DNA as a new organization has very much been also from this space of a sustainable future proofing of our business and I dare say of the world. So a little bit about the New Gen project. The long and short of it, everyone, is that at the end of the day, Trinidad and Tobago's petrochemical sector is very much based on natural gas. The challenge it faces currently is that there is a curtailment of shortage of natural gas to feed the ammonia and methanol plants. The real thing that the ammonia and methanol plants are short of is hydrogen that is extracted from the fossil fuel natural gas. What the New Gen project is designed to do is to create hydrogen from carbon neutral and renewable sources through the process of electrolysis, which is essentially taking water, zapping it with electricity, and creating hydrogen and oxygen. Now, why this is so important for the development of a sustainable energy future for Trinidad and Tobago, and I dare say the world, is that it now allows us to displace the requirement of fossil fuels, in this case natural gas, with fossil-free fuels such as the hydrogen emanating from water that ultimately contribute to the lowering of the carbon footprint of the planet. less greenhouse gas emissions is really the calling card of what many of us in the energy sector are passionate about achieving. And the NewGen project is the very real materialization of that. Yes, in Trinidad, but as you'll see shortly, also for the Caribbean. So just quickly putting a little bit of meat on the bones as to what we're talking about. At the end of the day, the goal is to produce as much renewable or carbon neutral electricity sources that can electrolyze water to create the hydrogen that can then be fed into, in this case, an ammonia plant, which can now generate what's known as carbon neutral or green ammonia that can then be exported to other parts of the world. And of course, ammonia is used for fertilizer. So where this meets you and me in the grocery store is, if we are prepared to pay a few cents more, knowing that our loaf of bread has not contributed to greenhouse gas emissions, then we would fundamentally pay a few cents more. And that is the overall business model that the whole world is, I dare say, demanding from consumers, from shareholders, that in all that we do, we need to ensure that we instill a greener component of our activities, particularly prominent in the energy sector. So in a nutshell, the NewGen project, and forgive me, I'm an engineer, so I'm going to throw some numbers and terminology that hopefully most everyone will get. We're going to be generating about 27,000 tons per year of carbon neutral and green hydrogen through the electrolysis of water to one of the many ammonia plants in Point Lisa, Trinidad. This one is the Tringen Yarra ammonia facility. And again, using electricity that is also generated from a carbon-free source of either waste heat or solar. So this is the backdrop of NewGen, and why is it important to many people in the business space who are looking to, how do I pivot my business to be more in that sustainable focused area? Well, as the next couple of slides will show, is the NewGen project can be viewed as a green catalyst for the sustainable energy transition of the Caribbean. You may recall I mentioned we need renewable electricity to generate the hydrogen that will then generate the ammonia. We're talking about a shortfall of 400,000 tons per year of hydrogen at the Point Lisa estate today. This NewGen project would fill 27,000 tons, but you can see there's a tremendous gap and thereby opportunity to generate more renewable electricity from within the region to help feed this hungry beast that is known as Point Lisa in providing them with carbon neutral and green hydrogen. And as you can see from this slide, CARICOM is awash with opportunities for generating renewable energy, which is a very real opportunity if people are looking to redirect their business in the sustainable space. This is a very real opportunity that I would go so far to call an unstoppable trend, and it is worth paying attention to because it is coming. To put values around it, we've estimated there's at least $3 to $5 billion of investment coming to CARICOM to build this renewable energy generation demand, that production capability, because at the end of the day, if we are able to get that type of renewable energy to feed that hungry Point Lisa animal, then it lights up the whole CARICOM from that green space of sustainable energy production and sustainable energy-based products and derivatives, which the whole world is calling for and clamoring for. Now, just changing gears a little bit, the company behind NewGen is Kenneth J. Green, so we say welcome to the green. And as you can see, our motto is to create unlimited possibilities for a sustainable world. Now, this NewGen project is the first of many green projects that Kenneth J. Green will be developing. You saw a few hinted at in the previous slides, because there's a tremendous opportunity to create a pipeline of green decarbonized projects for the benefit of our economies and our environment. Now, this gave us a great opportunity to design from the very basic elements of a new business as to what we stand for in the sustainable future. And recently we had the launch of our Kenneth J. Green office within the past month. So I'm cheating a little bit, and I'm about to show a video that really summarizes the core of what we're about, that we talked about at the launch with the staff. So if you'll allow me just 2 minutes to share this video, and I'll come back to you on the end. So Chemistry Green is literally being built on the foundation or the bedrock of chemistry systems. And when you're building from something, you need pillars. And what we see on this wall here are the 4 cornerstone pillars on which the green platform is being built. So I'll quickly take you through it. The first pillar is, and you'll notice the P as the commonality. First is people, where we're focused on investing and improving the lives of our people by creating skills and new job opportunities. Yeah. The next is planet. You know, we are guided by values of preservation and sustainability of the environment while promoting the development focused on investing in our people. The next one is progress. We are taking action as a business leader by enabling growth and driving innovation in the global energy space. And then partnership, where we are building a network where ideas and opportunities improve the value of doing business both locally and regionally. Now, these are not traditional pillars that you hear of companies, but I will tell you these are the pillars of the future. You know, and I have to thank Board Director Navin Budai for helping to conceptualize these remarkably relevant pillars to where Chemistry Green is going and from which we're being built upon. Because one pillar that most people would be looking for also begins with a P, and that would be profit, right? Traditionally, companies are built with profit first and everything else second. But in this new era and new environment and new world that we live in, it's the focusing on these kind of pillars that invariably lead to profit. No longer is the opposite true. So I will say there is nothing quite like a bright green wall with these 4 pillars on it to keep you grounded and focused on what we stand for. And you know, this slide just gives a quick summary again of what was shared. And every one of us at Chemistry Green believe in what these pillars stand for. I will conclude by talking to the last 2 shown here, progress and partnership. And really, in a nutshell, that philosophy of putting these front and center lead to great things. So our ability to create partnerships with the NGC group of companies has allowed us to progress our conversation much more than just the New Gen project, but what the future of a new hydrogen economy would look like for the petrochemical sector. And then in terms of the progress combined with partnerships, we at Chemistry Green created a voluntary hydrogen research collaborative, which is really designed with these entities contributing to harness a regional intellect, important emphasis on regional intellect, for us all to come together and design and define what this new hydrogen economy could mean for all of us. So if you look at it as a green think tank, again, there's no profit-driven thinking here. It's research, it's development, it's collaboration, it's bringing the best minds together to really create opportunities from which everyone benefits, both in a sustainable and I would say profit-directed way. So this is really what I wanted to share. Again, I can't say I'm an ESG specialist by any means, but I am blessed to have a team around me who have dedicated themselves to this cause of putting the people, the planet, the progress and partnerships first. And just to conclude, you know, if ever there was incentive or motivation to keep us all focused on this goal of sustainability, it is our family. You know, for those of you who may have watched on the left of the video, I had the privilege of having both my father, Dr. Ken Julian, at the launch of Chemistry Green, who has been my inspiration, and my son, Nathaniel Julian, who has been my motivation. And I encourage us all to adapt a similar kind of viewpoint as we move forward in creating a sustainable world for all. So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for the time and the opportunity, and I look forward to the panel discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Philip. Thank you for pointing the way, introducing the concept of the alternative hydrogen gas value chain, highlighting the fact that we're transitioning to carbon neutrality and a green hydrogen generation. And obviously that supports a lot of the sustainable development goals, not only in Barbados, that's looking to be completely carbon independent by 2030, but certainly the CARICOM goals along a similar line. Thank you very much, Julian, again. We are now going to progress on to Mrs. Ronelle Daythorne Baird, who is a partner at PricewaterhouseCoopers. She's going to speak to us on the topic of governance for economic and social good. Governance for economic and social good. She's the environmental, social, and governance leader for the East Caribbean firm and the tax and legal services leader for the Caribbean region, as well as an attorney at law, a fellow of the Institute of Chartered Secretaries of Canada, and holds an LLM Masters in Corporate and Commercial Law with an emphasis on corporate governance. Ronelle has extensive experience in the examination and implementation of international corporate governance best practice, having led teams in the provision of engagements for board assessments and board training for Barbados and regional conglomerates. This has included in-depth evaluation interviews for boards of directors of companies based in Barbados, Grenada, Trinidad, and the Cayman Islands. Ronelle, over to you. We're very excited to hear and to gain knowledgeable insights from your presentation this afternoon.
Thank you, Tricia. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you to the BCCI and the ACCA for the invitation to be with you today. I'll jump straight in because we are, trying to stick to our time. I was asked to share some thoughts on governance for economic, environmental, and social good. How do we as a region reset strategy to create sustainable value, and what does that value entail? The reality is that we're facing what is an extremely challenging road to economic recovery within our region. That's our reality. And I think our private sector's resilience is going to continue to be tested. The boards and the management teams that they oversee, they have a very, very important role to play in setting the benchmark, leading the way in driving accountability, driving trust for the benefit, not just of their shareholders, but understanding that it's stakeholders as a whole who now need to be the focus of our corporations. So we have a chance to make sure that this recovery is built on a strong foundation and one that inspires our people, inspires all stakeholders. This has to set the standards as well, I think, for our governments, our public sector, our legislators, to be more proactive and forward-thinking in the future of our economies as we face emerging risks in a more proactive manner. So in doing that, we have to consider, what is value? And that is largely what this renewed focus on environmental, social, and governance is all about. And from my perspective, the governance really comes first in driving then what a board decides in terms of its environmental and its social impact. Those have to happen at a governance level for the right decisions to be made by a corporation as an entity that does not have a mind of its own, but functions through its board in determining what environmental and social impact is going to have, whether that's going to be positive or negative. So I like to view the dynamics of corporate governance against what I call a backdrop of a framework of accountability. And I'll just touch on this quickly because, again, I'm conscious of time. It deals really with the checks and balances that we need to put in place to ensure that we strike the right balance as any enterprise between the corporate governance players. And it has to be thoughtfully done if it's going to be effective. It has to strike the right balance between accountability to all stakeholders and the encouragement of enterprise to create what is true success and sustainability. And those goals have to in turn then inform a company's strategy. We have to remember that the real value also comes from doing so within a framework that allows boards and the companies that they serve to do the right thing, to create value that is purposefully driven, with an acknowledgement of what is right and ultimately what is wrong. And that's a decision that every director has to face every time you enter the boardroom. Because a company is an incapacitated person. For it to be socially responsible, for it to be environmentally responsible, the board has to serve as the mind, the heart, and the conscience of a company. And those are the conversations that we've always tried to have as governance professionals in supporting boards in determining what approach to take to their governance model and where they need to spend their time and focus their energy. What ESG has done is to make that conversation far more direct and real, which is welcome from my perspective. So it ultimately comes down to the shareholder value versus stakeholder protection argument, and that has been the debate since limited liability companies were first invented decades and decades ago. It ultimately culminates in the ultimate discussion on corporate governance, whether a corporation needs to be run exclusively on behalf of shareholders, taking only their financial capital and interests into account, or whether the corporation is ethically bound to take the interests of a variety of stakeholders into account. And that, of necessity, must include the environment and society, because our environment and our society, they also provide forms of capital to an enterprise. It's not just the dollars and cents that shareholders invest. Our environment pays the price for the profit that a company derives, and our society pays a price as well, whether it's from being a client or just the fallout, whether positive or negative, of how that company seeks to operate in its environment. So you have a company at this point, we have to understand that this has to become central to our strategies. And in the past, I think we've acknowledged the need for these wider goals, but we haven't truly made this central to how we operate strategically, and that just cannot be the case any longer. So let's take a very quick look at the steps our private sector companies, I think, will need to take to create true sustainable economic and social value. I think the reality is that the majority of our regional privately owned companies are only vaguely trying to not be unkind, but if at all, focused on governance initiatives. Our public companies and our financial institutions, I think they've started to move in the right direction, but real progress, I think, can still only be attributed to a few key players who are really, really focused on how they change their strategy to have a more meaningful, positive impact on the 3 Ps. Internationally, most private sector companies, whether privately owned or publicly listed, they've put governance frameworks into place, but most are still in the early stages of their real ESG journey. So there's this renewed focus on making sure that any approach to governance has a wider view of the responsibility of the board to do the right thing. And that this imperative speaks to a stakeholder group, as I said before, and as Dr. Dick Ford mentioned earlier, one that is far beyond the traditional. So the ESG imperative, in essence, now demands greater attention and accountability on issues that we've discussed and we've considered and often paid lip service to with a sort of check the box mentality. But it also demands an acknowledgement that value in the context of a company absolutely must carry a dual definition. And the first is the price of something, the tangible economic value to be derived from enterprise. And the second is a more intangible value, the importance of what we hold dear to us, including the need to do right by the environment and society. So it's within that context that the ES journey really has gained a lot of momentum over the last, I would say, 12 to 24 months. So ESG isn't new. It's built on the foundation of many earlier developments, but is, as Dr. Dick Ford said, it is here to stay. It is impactfully reimagined, I like to say, but it is helping to drive the discussions that we absolutely must have, not only at a global level, but we have to drill down within the region and within our local territories and have these discussions. The impact of an entity's actions on the environment and the society, and how good governance can ensure that this impact is positive. It's not new, but it has to come to the table in a far more meaningful way, because these things are not just nice to haves anymore, but it's the basis of resetting the framework and the tools needed for meaningful value creation at economic, environmental, and social levels. You know, the demand is that companies figure out how to create financial value while solving the big problems that face us environmentally and socially. And you know, that featured very heavily in Philip's presentation. And all of it has to be within a governance framework that ensures some transparency, the right level of transparency and accountability. So that then is going to lead us to new measures of success, including environmental sustainability, societal impact, employee engagement, and the quality of our external partnerships. Who are we choosing to do business with? And what is the level of their impact at their own operational level on the environment and on society? Those things ultimately tie back to us in the choices that we make as an enterprise. So the questions around the boardroom table now are, you know, this is a lot. Like, where do we start? Where should we focus when the list of areas is so long? And where do we find these opportunities to solve big problems while creating value? And you know, I'm sympathetic to the fact that those questions are now being asked at a time that is so volatile. But these are the questions that every board and every company has to ask itself, regardless of the region, the size, or the industry. And I think boards need to console themselves with the fact that every positive step, no matter how small it is worthwhile. So not to feel overwhelmed by all of the conversations that are happening at the same time. I think we're all aware of the underlying forces that have brought these conversations very much to the table. Very quickly, COVID, of course, you know, the pandemic has been a very hard and unpleasant wake-up call to how interconnected we are. And the fact that we have the opportunity to be either have a very positive impact or a very negative impact on each other. Racial tensions, you know, the resurfacing of the realities of racial injustice have taken an emotional and angering toll on our global society. Consumers generally are just waking up very forcefully to the power of their pockets and the refusal to support those who are not seen to be doing right by society. So enterprises need to be very aware of this reality. Activist shareholders who continue to advocate for net zero policies and tighter linkages between ESG targets and executive comp packages. Investors, lenders, and rating agencies, they want a broader view of non-financial metrics to better understand what the risks are associated with a company. And then there are governments who have made commitments to limit carbon emissions. These are increasingly backed by new regulations and new taxes, and we're going to see our fair share of those within the region, I have no doubt.
Ronelle, can I ask you to just wrap up your final comments in the session?
Right here, Tricia, I will. Thanks. So just to quickly touch on where this new role of governance is going to take us then. It's going to call for stakeholders essentially calling for three things. Strategic reinvention, it's going to include assessing the progress of corporations against new metrics, and there's been so much discussion and so many initiatives, especially last year and this year, on how we report, but this then is going to require that companies consider how to reinvent themselves. How will boards choose to redeploy their finances, their people, and their products? Transformation, some level of partial or possibly wholesale business transformation has to take place as well, depending on the industry and the environmental impact. This, in most instances, will take some time so that the financial fallout isn't catastrophic to an enterprise, but has to happen to some degree. And then there's reimagined reporting, the heightened regulatory requirements that many of you as accountants, as auditors, are going to have to grapple with in support of your clients and your own companies, is a very stark reality. And it is one that I am comforted by the fact that we're seeing some coming together and meeting of the minds with all the different bodies, including IFAC and all of the different accounting bodies. The stock exchanges are all finally coming together to understand that there has to be a common approach, so that there's clarity in how we move forward with the level and type of reporting that is required to give stakeholders what they need. So with that, I'll close, Tricia. Thank you.
Thank you, Ronelle. Certainly following on from the tone set by Dr. Emily previously, looking at essentially the whole role of ESG, the imperative, and really unearthing the true value add. I particularly was interested in the commentary as it relates to what board of directors and shareholders in particular are demanding now, of their companies and how their money is invested, and looking more towards, socially responsible and sustainable type actions as opposed to just a pure profit motive. So thank you very much, Ronelle. I'm sure we will come back to that. I want to remind everyone as well, our audience who's very captive, please use the question icon or chat icon. I believe it's on the right of your screen to submit any questions, as we'll be coming up to our panel discussion in another 10 minutes or so. So please continue to put those questions there, and I shall be looking for them as we start the panel discussion. But to round up our featured speakers today, we are now going to pivot to our final speaker, and that is Mr. Patrick Hinkson, and he will be speaking to us on risk management best practices for sustainability. Risk management best practices for sustainability. Patrick is a finance professional, a qualified accountant with an expansive career in professional auditing, financial management and reporting, and general management, with over 25 years experience across a number of industries, from retail and distribution, diversified conglomerates, and telecommunications. He is the Chief Financial Officer of Sagicor General Insurance, Inc., a regional property and casualty insurance company. Mr. Hinkson is a past president of the Institute of Chartered Accountants of Barbados and previously a member of the Council of the Barbados Chamber of Commerce, and he now chairs its Risk Management and Crisis Recovery Committee. Welcome, Patrick, and we're anticipating the insights that you will share in your presentation.
Good afternoon, Tricia, and thanks everyone. First of all, apologies for my video. I'm having some technical challenges on my video, so unfortunately you won't be able to see me this afternoon. But just to get quickly into the presentation, the first thing which I really want to just look at, and the theme I'm looking at this evening is really risk management best practices for sustainability. And I guess as we look at sustainability, I think the main thing that we want to really focus on is that sustainable development means the actions that meet the needs of the present generations without compromising the needs of future generations. I think we have seen this a lot as several companies and governments seek to ensure that our children or our grandchildren are able to enjoy what we have enjoyed, and we're not destroying the economy, we're not destroying the climate, and therefore whatever we do as a company, we need to ensure that where we meet the needs of the present generation that we service, that those actions do not compromise the needs of the future generations that are to come after us. So, I mean, Misha would have already spoken of the ecosystem. And I guess my question really is there a chicken or egg situation as it relates to sustainability and profit? Because the question you would ask, are you sustainable because you are profitable? Or are you profitable because you are sustainable? And the need really is for organizations to ensure that they kind of fit within the three P's that Misha spoke of before, which are the profit, the people aspect, and the planning and the environmental component, which is really a very important part as we look at, how we operate as companies, where our focus is. And then the key thing really for us in this new paradigm is that we do well as a company, but we also do good. So we make profit, but we're not doing that, or we're not generating profit at the expense of inequitable wealth distribution, the social impact we have on people, or if we're actually destroying the environment that we operate in. And this is really what the ecosystem for sustainability will look like. I think Ronell would just mention a number of these factors here as we look at the business strategies, and really what is sustainable in terms of what are our business strategies. How are we looking at climate change, income inequality? Are we depleting our natural resources? How are we impacting human rights? Things such as fair working conditions, pollution, racial injustice, and gender inequality. And there are many more that can be added to this list. But I think one of the key things which I want to also say here is that sustainability in business is not purely altruistic. In other words, it's not all only about doing good and doing the right things, because at the end of the day, businesses have to be profitable. And you cannot do the good that you want to do in the world if you're not doing well financially. And I'm not seeing a company that haven't done well financially, was able to sustain. So the whole idea of doing well and doing good are all intertwined, and any business strategy need to encompass this. And it is also important when we then look at the risk management aspect of it, that we're able to identify, the various risks within these different categories and how we mitigate against them. How are we actually contributing to them? How are we measuring that impact? Are we making a positive difference? And therefore, that is really one of the key aspects when we look at the risk management component in terms of sustainability. So, I'm just going to go forward, and then I will just come back to the earlier slide. So really, the role of sustainable risk management is able to align efficient enough to sustain the business while preserving the environment. And I think one of the key things with sustainability is that a lot of the need for compliance, or what has driven compliance, have really been global and national regulations. So in other words, we only do what we need to do when the laws have been put in place in terms of reduced carbon emissions, laws such as in the case of Barbados, removal of single plastic use. A lot of those initiatives really came about by government demanding it of the corporations, and not really the organization seeking to implement these, because there were, the good things to do. It is what is sustainable for the company, what, protects the environment, and therefore protect and provide for this, for the future generations to come. And one of the reasons why risk management is very key to sustainability is if we go back, say, from the 1980s, as companies started to focus on what are their actions and how it is really impacting the environment, the social environment that is there, the actual physical environment, and the governance. And we started to see that these issues have been around for many years, well over 30 years, and I think they now really have been brought to light. We had the issues with Nike, where they were using child labor to manufacture, the $300 Air Jordans. And really, if you think of sustainability, while the company at the end is making the profit, you're actually, impacting society in a big way. If we remember the 2010 Deepwater Horizon explosion with BP, that actual environmental impact from that one accident cost BP, I believe it was about $60 billion in damages. So when you sit and you look at the risk, that can impact your organization and what the organization is actually doing, you then start to realize that there are many factors that feed into the organization that you need to be mindful of. And as part of your risk management, you need to ensure that you are mitigating the company against the reputational risk and financial risk that comes if there's some breakage in the ecosystem that actually support your organization. And then as we look also at risk management, I think one of the other items which we need to look at as organization is the whole idea of uniform versus unique ECGs. Because each entity, given its unique business model, its internal environmental and external environment, product or service mix, will have different ESGs compared to other organizations. So a manufacturing versus a service organization will not have the same unique environmental and social aspects that they'll be looking at in terms of the impact they will have on the company. And Ron, I just want to wrap up. I know we want to get into the panel discussion as quickly as possible. But why we focus on ESGs? One, you're really protecting your brand and you're mitigating against the risks and the impact that have on the organization. There is market research to show that being purpose-driven and really looking at your ESGs help companies to develop competitive advantages over other organizations. 3, they have been proven that there are very large and sustainable markets for companies who have a greater focus on ESGs in terms of their products, if they're environmentally good, and also how well those companies have done. And then the fact that you are actually driving change does bring cooperative action in terms of the impact you have with government, cooperation for your employees, customers, in helping you to achieve that change. And the final comment, which I will leave before we get into the panel discussion, as related to risk management, is that your risk change. And this was quite startling in that in 2008, the World Economic Forum, in terms of its global risk report, they had identified one societal risk, which was the pandemic, in terms of the top 5 risks at that point in time, and that was in 2008. And if we all remember, back then we would have had SARS, H1N1, and many other kind of small epidemics happening at the time. In 2018, 4 of the top 5 risks were environmental or societal, which include extreme weather events, water crises, natural disasters, failure of climate change mitigation and adaptation. And 3 years on, in 2021, pandemics have been put back on the list, and they're not only on the list, but they're now top of the list, given the impact of COVID. And therefore, as we look at risk management and how we are sustainable, we have to identify that our risk will change and that we're not looking at the same risks from year to year or month to month. So I will leave it there right now, Tricia, and I will hand it back to you and then to the panel discussion.
Thank you, Patrick. I think a very powerful way to end the presentation from the main speakers, certainly building on the theme as we progress, particularly the ecosystem referred to in your presentation. I'm particularly piqued by the question, are you sustainable because you're profitable, or are you profitable because you're sustainable? I think that is something we need to explore a bit more as we get into the panel discussion. I'd like now for all of our panelists to come on camera as we pivot now towards the panel discussion portion of the webinar today. I'm also seeing lots of great questions coming through from the audience, as well. I do note, Patrick, I know you're having an issue with your camera, so we know you're there. And great.
I'm still here.
Yes, fantastic, excellent. All right, I'm going to pick up where Miss Emily Dick-Ford was unceremoniously interrupted earlier, because I think it speaks to the center and the core of what we're discussing here today. And we ended on her exposition on what is the substance of sustainability. What's the substance? So I'm going to pose that first question to Miss Emily Dick-Ford and give her the opportunity just to spend 2 minutes explaining to us essentially what is the true essence of sustainability? What is the core of this conversation?
Thank you, Trisha. I felt like my legs were cut off from under me, but I think it was a good thing because what I heard was excellent from the other presenters. The substance of sustainability is, and I'm going to quote from the World Bank, sustainable development growth must be both inclusive, environmentally sound, to reduce poverty, build shared prosperity for today's population. Now, sustainability, therefore, is not anything that we've seen before. And so it really calls for a shift in the way we think. And I like what Philip shared, and then Ronell shared, and then what Patrick shared, because it's really showing us that it is business unusual. And in fact, it is a mindset that is focused not just on the business and on profits. In fact, I want to recommend to all of us a book called Beyond the Triple Bottom Line, because the triple bottom line is no longer it. And the triple bottom line does not give you sustainability. So sustainability really is, and I would say it's captured in the 17 Sustainable Development Goals. And if you go through those goals in detail, because Trisha, you would not, I know you would believe it, I have endless slides on the SDGs. And I'll tell you that for the Sustainable Development Goals, the E, S, and G, all of them are covered. The environment, social governance, they are covered. We have tons of SDGs that cover that commitment. And those goals all have targets, and businesses have no query about how do I achieve this? How do I contribute to clean water and sanitation? How do I contribute to sustainable cities and communities? The targets are there. All of this information is online. And so sustainability is way beyond what we have been doing currently, and we cannot try to fit how we think about business into sustainability. We have to now rethink and transform, and I saw that on the screen by someone else. There's a transformation that's needed for us to get on the path to sustainability. And I'll stop there, Trisha. Thanks.
Thank you, Dr. Emily. You raise a very poignant question. Now, when we speak to Sustainable Development Goals, we are, of course, speaking to those goals that have been articulated by the United Nations. There's a very ambitious timeline to achieve them. And, you know, there are 17 of them. And I was just speaking at a similar forum last week. And one of the major issues that we're confronted with as the private sector in particular is how do we actually reinterpret those sustainable development goals, which seem to be very esoteric, very community and socially based, into a very hard profit, business conversation. For that, I'm gonna pivot to Ronell and ask you to take that question up for us. How does a business go about actually taking what appears to be these very esoteric, societal based matrices, and essentially, as you say, basically bring them out into a corporate dashboard, measure and monitor them, for success?
Thanks, Tricia. Yes, I think it has to be driven ultimately by governance. It has to start with the board making the determination that because these goals have been set, because this is its purpose, it will take the steps necessary to achieve that purpose, to operate in a way that is responsible environmentally, socially, and that its long-term objectives are going to support those goals. And so it is going to call for some reinvention. I don't think we can get away from it. I think every company is going to have to think along the lines of, how are we going to assess our success and our progress against new metrics? How are we going to redeploy resources? No company has an infinite amount of resources. How are you going to redeploy those resources in a meaningful way to have the type of impact that this company wants to have? And that speaks to finances, people, products. The board has to ask itself, you know, who are we and how can we best compete in an environment where these new values have to be central to what our goals are? It just can't be business as usual. So that I see you, Philip. I see you, and I was very impressed. Very impressed.
Trisha, I really didn't mean to interrupt, but I just really wanted to reinforce what Ronelle just said. And look, in our case, you know, we have a board, and I think we're good enough to say we know that we don't know everything. But what we were able to do, and I'm using it as a case example, is to bring someone on, a young, vibrant, energetic, passionate, who knows the ins and outs of what we're talking about today, and to allow ourselves to be educated by this individual. This is Miss Zinzi John. We created a category for Zinzi. Her work title is Low Carbon Sustainability Lead. Again, that's a fairly new title. And then from that, and empowering Zinzi, you know, she's able to help us look through as a business the lens of the SDGs, and it's through her lens that our learning has come, and we are able to tag the New Gen project to 5 or 6 SDGs. You know, there's Goal 2, Zero Hunger. I talked about ammonia feeding the world. Goal 8, decent work and economic growth. Goal 9, industry, innovation, and infrastructure. You know, you saw about the H2RC. Goal 12, responsible consumption and production, whether it be electricity, water, and of course, the most obvious one is Goal 13, climate action, which is at the root cause of what drove New Gen into existence. So I'm just reinforcing and giving some of our individual examples of how we were able to address what Ronelle's very valid observation was.
And thank you, Philip, for speaking, because I want to pivot to the questions that are coming from the audience, and I think you're very well placed, Philip, to answer. I'm going to combine 2 of them because I think they speak and point to the same thing. Question is coming from the audience, and particularly as it related to your comment in terms of the value chain that you articulated for us. And you made a comment that would suggest that perhaps doing things the right way in a more sustainable way may have a bit of a cost premium, at least in the initial stages. And a member of our audience wants to know, how do we change mindsets and business thinking to go for the sustainable instead of the cheaper option? And a related comment would be, are we looking to reach a point where sustainability does not convey the expectation of being more expensive?
Well, here's the interesting thing. You know, at the end of the day, you know, you either be the change or you let the change happen to you. And what the world is demonstrating through carbon taxes or carbon credits, which we've been largely silent on, is that the world is demanding it. The consumers are demanding it. Ronelle said the activist shareholders are demanding it. So the question of paying a premium for a product on the shelves, that's responsible consumerism. But it's more than that. It's the carrot and the stick. So if I'm exporting a ton of green ammonia or a ton of gray ammonia that's made with fossil fuel, you know, Europe is going to happily pay me more for a ton of green ammonia and happily penalize me more for a ton of gray ammonia. So it's a different dynamic that's emerging, that ultimately the world will regularize itself over time, because if you keep that kind of positive pressure up, more and more green comes, less and less gray comes, and then the supply-demand equilibrium will happen, and then prices will become manageable. But it is an energy transition, and it's the carrot and stick that's going to be driving a lot of the actions in the years to come, because we only have one climate, and we got to make it work. 1.5 degrees or bust, right?
Thank you, Philip. Okay, Patrick, we can't see, but we know you're there, and I want you to take this one. How do we convince SMEs, small medium enterprises, to adopt more ESG related goals into their business strategy, when typically SMEs tend to have an informal approach to governance and primarily focus on profit, naturally because they're struggling to sustain and to survive. They're typically in survival mode, and certainly after the pandemic, that's been aggravated even more. How do we convince SMEs in particular to adopt more ESG related goals into their business strategy?
I mean, I think, Tricia, I think the important thing, and Philip was hinting at it as well, and Ronelle mentioned it in her presentation, is that there are consumers who are willing to pay a premium for products and services which are environmentally friendly. And therefore, as an SME, you have to determine, are you contributing to society, or are you there to hurt society? Are your actions help, or are they hindering, what should be the good that you're doing? Because there are little things that companies can do, SMEs, to really help with sustainability. The whole idea of the carbon footprint and gases and stuff like that. So are they using petrol vehicles, or are they using, say, electric vehicles for their deliveries? So, I mean, a simple change as, changing your fleet as they come up to, say, electric vehicles to reduce that carbon emission is looking at seriously contributing, to improving the ESG. So I think you can take small steps along the way. Not, every company has billions of dollars that they can spend, but you can decide, I'm going to be a paperless company. That is also, being in terms of sustainability. I'm not going to, deliver my products in plastic bags. There are a number of things which SMEs or even micro companies can start to say, this is what I am going to be doing to ensure sustainability, because I really believe that this is important, to the country, to the environment, and to the people that live and work and in this environment.
Well, thank you, Patrick. I want to pivot back to Dr. Emily, and I want to ask you to expand a little bit on your comments as far as it relates to the role of social and economic accounting in highlighting the social contract that businesses have with their communities.
Thank you, Tricia, again. Social and environmental accounting, which led into corporate social responsibility, which has been, I would say, quantified by ESG, because that's what ESG is. ESG is a more quantified approach to CSR, and CSR has been badly treated, being thrown into the marketing department and the public relations department. It did not belong there at all. But certainly ESG has really brought the focus in. And so with respect to institutions, their social responsibility, at the core, the most important, and I want to just jump into what you asked earlier, what you asked Patrick, the most important responsibility of an institution is to properly govern itself. So governance stands at the heart of CSR. If you, and I want to recommend ISO 26000, you know me, Tricia, this is all about education here. ISO 26000, the guidance CSR standard, is critical for our understanding of all of this, including ESG. At the core stands governance, and that is where we begin to be a responsible institution. And once you are being governed properly, you have to, I wish I could show the ISO diagram. I don't think I have sharing privileges, but there's an important diagram I would have liked to show, which shows you all of the things that you're then required to do as a responsible institution. Human rights, and Patrick called them out, labor practices, the environment, fair operating practices, consumer issues, community involvement, and development. And so for me, a socially responsible institution begins with good governance. And what's at the core of good governance? Your proper accounting system. And that's where the accountants become central to this, because the accountants are best able to capture the information, and we are now being more equipped to do non-financial. And even when we talk about non-financial, we as accountants know how to ensure relevance and materiality in what is being shared. And so social and environmental accounting was all about how do we ensure that companies not only do good, but they take account, they measure or capture how we impact the society and environment, and that we are also impacted by the reporting that comes out of that system. So it's just management accounting and financial account and external reporting. So we need to know internally how we have done, make changes, and then we need to provide an account to our people outside. So that's kind of it in a nutshell. Thank you.
Thanks, Dr. Emily. I should also add the establishment of a UN Social Compact, which is their business facilitation arm that they're now establishing in the Barbados and the OBCS. Critical to that in terms of a key deliverable of that secretariat is to do exactly what you've just said. Essentially to matrix and to enable the private sector to be able to incorporate the SDG goals into their governance conversations, into their boardrooms, and hopefully into their dashboards, and be able to measure and monitor, not just for themselves, but more importantly, I think, against a global dashboard and benchmarking for similar sectors, similar areas, similar size, size companies. And so we can actually start this conversation going in the same direction. I want to then come back to Ronelle. I have questions from the audience for Ronelle specifically. How do we initiate change in the private sector, particularly as it relates to private and family-owned businesses, to recognize the value of corporate governance? And they're expanding that into 3 areas, not just corporate governance, risk management, and sustainability, up against a very, very strong profit motive, because very often the board members are indeed the shareholders. And you're very much aware of that and the dynamics that creates. How in the family, essentially, not just the boardroom, but the living room, technically, where business tends to occur in these types of families, do we initiate change along the line of value of corporate governance and ESGs?
It is a tough one. It's a tough one, and it's one that I must admit I've attempted a few times over, I would say, the last 10 to 15 years, but have chosen instead to focus a lot of my energy on those who want to have the discussion, rather than trying to drag others along in the meantime. But the reality is, the smaller the enterprise and the more closely held it is, you have to speak the language of the bottom line in many instances. Unfortunately, there are those family companies who are willing to at least have the conversation, but not too many are willing to think beyond the P, the profit, rather than the people and the planet. And I would say the one shot we have is having the conversation about customers and employees. For these family businesses to grow, they're still going to need the correct input. They need new thought, new ideas. You can often get those either from family members who are of a younger generation, or you look externally. And the reality is that younger generations are not willing to lend their talents and their expertise in many instances to companies who they don't view as doing the right thing. They're not willing to help to build a business, especially for someone else, if they don't see the positive impact that that corporation, whether it's closely held or not, can have on society and can have on the environment. And that is where our different generations really can have a positive impact. Our customers are voting with their pockets, our younger employees are voting with their talents and their time, and they're not willing to invest that in a corporation, be it privately held or otherwise, that is not seen to be doing the right thing. So I would say, that can often open the discussion if the will is not actually there, that you still tie it back to how are you going to be successful if you don't have the right people who are not interested in you because you're not doing the right thing.
Thank you. Very poignant points indeed. Philip, can I come back to you and ask you a question from the panel again, from the audience? to address the issue of financing sustainability as it relates to being profitable, but taking the planet and people into consideration. What does that look like?
Well, right now, if we're talking about financing sustainable projects or green projects, the world is awash with green funding right now. I mean, you open the newspaper, you hear about a new hydrogen fund or a new green energy fund, even locally and regionally. Some of the banks are announcing green energy funds. So the will is there, the desire is there, the funding is there. I think we're now, I think the financing will, and we're experiencing this with the New Gen project, is in itself in its own evolution, because we talk about metrics, right? And a green project metric versus a profit-driven exclusive metric, they're different. Or the mechanisms to assess on the level of robustness or the type of parameters you look at, there's a challenge that the financing world is now facing is to, well, it's no longer this, it's now this, but I'm still, this is all I know. So as a result, it takes a little bit longer to get the funding released. So there's a very fascinating learning evolution going on in the financing community, because all of the major banks, they want, their shareholders are demanding that they finance green projects. So the funding is there, the desire is there, the mechanisms are being worked to make it easy. And I dare say, coming back to the SMEs, there's a strong desire to make it easier for SMEs to be able to access some of this green funding. And that's the transition I think some of these financing institutions are finding themselves in.
Thank you, Philip. And I'm going to ask maybe the last official question before I do a general roundtable to Patrick. Patrick, what is the role in government, or for the government? What role does the government play in advancing the ESG conversation?
I think, Tricia, I think governments are well aware of the impact of business on the environment, the need for social equity, and really, I think what I would have indicated in my presentation is that a lot of the changes that we see with the whole ESGs are really driven by legislation. So in the need to reduce pollution, say in the case of Barbados, the fact in terms of reducing our dependency on fossil fuels. I mean, a lot of initiatives are really driven by government, and really how government assists is really what we have seen here is a lot of the incentives in terms of solar production. So we're reducing the reliance on fossil fuel for electricity. That will help, companies start really to look at, how are we contributing? Are we contributing positively or negatively to where we live and work? And I think that's where how government would deal with it, by really just legislating changes. We did it here also in Barbados with these ban on single-use plastics. And I think that's really the role I think government will have to play, providing the legislative framework as well as incentives to force companies or encourage companies to take a greater look in terms of how they operate.
Mm-hmm. A follow-on question from your comment, Patrick. Do you think the average company is aware of what the 17 Sustainable Development Goals are in the Caribbean?
I would say no. And I think what I would say no is that I think many times we see these goals as only relevant to the larger developed countries, the multinationals who span. And really, I think we have to bring those goals, we have to nationalize them, we have to make them more relevant, to the companies in your particular country, because as I would have said in my presentation, they're uniform and they're unique ESGs. And unless I have a vested interest or it impacts me directly, or I see the benefit that I can maybe on one or two goals, I think that's where companies lose focus because they just don't see it as being relevant to them because I'm a micro organization or something to that effect, and therefore those goals relate to the more developed countries, the multinational organizations, and not really your what we would have said earlier, your privately owned, mom and pop type companies that operate within the Caribbean market.
No, indeed. Thank you for that. Okay, in the final moments, I'm going to do a round table. I'm going to ask each panel to consider the following question. It is now October 2021. The world essentially has gone through 19-20 months of significant social dislocation and economic upheaval. What have we learned? Are we any more sustainable today than we were in January 2020? And I'll start with Dr. Emily. Then I will go to Ronell, Philip, and I'll end with Patrick.
Thank you. Really, really good question. And I go right back to where I started with the IPCC report, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, and the answer from the scientists and from the science is no, we are no closer to being sustainable. However, there are parts of the world, and remember, this is a global thing. It has to be a global effort for us to really say we have reached or we are getting closer to sustainability or where we need to be. And there are parts of the world where the experience and the practice and the consciousness is very heightened. So I would say the EU in particular and the UK, since they began preparing for COP26, the UK has totally turned around a lot of things. They always were on that path, but not as aggressive as they have been now. But in the Caribbean, we remain almost at the bottom of the pile in terms of how we are addressing. I would say not so much about how we are addressing, because what Philip presented here is world-class renewable energy. So it's happening in the Caribbean. What I'm hearing from Ronell is clearly an understanding. However, the consciousness in the region is way behind where it needs to be. People are not aware, they are not interested, and we do not have the kind of information system that is really sharing and encouraging, especially that consumerism, that mindset, that sustainability mindset for all of us as consumers, that is missing. And so I would say that, and I think COVID has caused us in the region to be a little bit more, I don't want to say insular, but it has actually made us retreat from going where we needed to go. So we feel a sense of loss, a great loss, and we think that sustainability means more loss, but it doesn't. And so I want to say that, because I'm a hopeful person, I want to say that there is hope, but we need to work harder at it, and we need to really, spotlight more cases and institutions that are doing the sustainable things and really take hold of it. The governments are doing a lot. We have quite a lot of renewable energy projects around the region, but the consciousness is what I think is still missing. That understanding, especially by both senior people in business and people, the average citizen. Yeah, we have a lot to do in this region.
Mm-hmm.
So thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Emily. Ronell?
Yes, I have to agree with Dr. Dickford. I mean, I think we are very much in survival mode. And so we just have not had the mind space, or we've given ourselves the excuse of not having the mind space to focus on these issues. But the reality is that it's not something that is within our discretion. It is something that absolutely is vital for the survival beyond COVID. I know right now it doesn't feel like there's anything beyond COVID. I understand that's the emotional state that we're all in, but there has to be a beyond COVID, and there has to be a beyond COVID for our children and our grandchildren. And when we speak of are we any more conscious, and have we made any progress in terms of sustainability, I think we still have to speak not only of the environmental, which is absolutely vital, but also the social. So are we any more conscious, given the last year and a half, 2 years, of the impact that we have on each other in society? Are we more aware of the positive impact we can have if we each take small steps? As Patrick alluded to, if every organization takes the right first steps internally and is then able to hold others externally accountable, and is then collectively as a private sector able to look to the government and the public sector to hold each other accountable, in terms of what we can do both internally and externally to have both a positive environmental and social impact, we will immediately start to make progress. It's the small steps we need to take first. With those small steps internally, every organization, every person driving that discussion, and for like these, like this one is really important because it helps then to get the word out, and each of us on the panel, each of us participating, if we continue to have those conversations, we will then start to see some progress. But I do understand the distraction that COVID has been, but we cannot continue to use that as an excuse.
Thank you, very well put. Philip, your closing thoughts?
There's a lot just shared that I fully agree with. I mean, the whole challenge that COVID has brought is that survival mindset, particularly in developing nations, right? And the challenge is survival is not sustainability, right? And that's a very dangerous realization, that if you're stuck, and COVID has really got us more in that survival mode. If you get stuck in that survival mode and not do things to help break that cycle and allow us to simultaneously think about a sustainable way of life, then it's not a great outcome. But the corollary is just as Ronald says, that I think COVID has allowed technology to emerge, such as the very type of panel that we're having now on GoToWebinar, or whether it's Zoom or Teams, that the opportunity for access, for education and awareness and knowledge as to what good should look like is very much more prevalent, in my opinion, now than ever before, because of COVID driving us in front of our computers. And then again, it's the balance. It's as Ronald said, the whole social dynamic is another toll that we've taken. There's nothing quite like meeting like-minded individuals in person to network and share and dialogue and be inspired by. So I would view this, the COVID pandemic, it now serves as a great opportunity if we're able to emerge from our respective shells, as it were, and with caution, but with commitment, re-engage with each other as the human species around this refocused importance of developing a sustainable future. That, I think, is a recipe for success that COVID has brought upon us, and it's up to us to take full advantage of it and make it work for us.
Indeed. Thank you, Philip. And Patrick, once again, you have the last word.
Thanks, Tricia. What I would say is that COVID has been the great equalizer, and it has brought every country, every company in this world pretty much down to the same level, that what we experience in the Caribbean is no different to what the multinationals in Europe and the United States experience, and that we are all learning from the same experience. And therefore, this, I think, is the one time that we can say that the world has had a, as I want to say, united position in terms of how we move forward and what is important. And I think that will also help ensure sustainability and bring some level of equality where there's been great inequality in the past.
Okay, thank you, Patrick. Thank you to our esteemed panel this afternoon, Dr. Emily Dick Ford, Ms. Ronald Laythorne Baird, Mr. Philip Julian, and Mr. Patrick Hinkson. We thank you all for a very stimulating 2 hours. We also thank our opening speaker, Shelly Mohammed from ACCA Caribbean, and Misha Logan Clark from the Barbados Chamber of Commerce and Industry. I thoroughly enjoyed this session, and unfortunately, I have to keep watching my clock so that I don't get in trouble with ACCA or BCCI. But I certainly hope we're able to capture and certainly present at least the core of this issue. It's a very emotive issue, very, very interesting, and we could have done a lot more with a lot more time, I'm sure. But I'm sure ACC and BCCI will be back again for part 2. Thank you so much to our listening audience, which is just over 400 persons out of 800 who are registered and who will still be accessing the content. And I think that's a fantastic signal to how topical and engaging this conversation certainly is. My name is Trisha Tanis. I've been your moderator for this afternoon session, and I now hand back over to Maria. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Trisha. I have to say that this has probably, it has definitely surpassed my expectations. I'm very passionate about this whole topic. And I think when you think about the ecosystem that Misha had mentioned, profit, people, and planet, that in itself should be the crux of what we're looking at here as sustainability. And so many areas that each of the speakers brought up were so instrumental, I think, for all of us as finance professionals, as business owners, as non-finance people on the whole. But we are human beings and we live in this huge globe, and we're all affected. And ACCA committed to the UN SDGs in 2019. And what I think is very real for me is that we are in 2021 and we're working towards 2030 as far as the SDGs are concerned, which is 9 years away when you think about it. And, a lot of us are saying, we're writing off 2020. It really does not exist because of COVID and so on. So the fact of the matter is that we really need to jump on this like yesterday. I was having a conversation earlier this week with Philip and Emily, and we were talking about government buy-in and also buy-in of businesses on the whole. And in the Caribbean, as Emily and some of the other presenters indicated previously, the Caribbean is still somewhat behind in terms of reaching where we need to be at this point in time. So I do believe there is a lot of work still to be done, as the presenters indicated. We do have things like the New Gen project, as Philip mentioned, feeding that giant Point Lisa's estate, looking at green energy. We're looking as well at, of course, consumables for all of us as people in this new world of sustainability. And I think it was Patrick who mentioned that the ESG impact comes from as far back as the 80s with the Nestle breast milk situation. So this is really not something new, but something which we have a lot of work to do in order to get to where we need to be. And Ronel's contribution as it related to the new role of governance and boards and shareholder value and stakeholder protection as well. There are just so many elements that we needed to weave into this whole sustainability framework. So I do hope that this small bit that we have been able to do today, 2 hours, barely scratches the surface of what we need, or the information that we need to get out there, and the education that we need to get out there to our stakeholders, our shareholders, our businesses, our people on a whole. And hopefully we would be able to continue along this path. So like Trisha said, I would like to thank our partners, BCCI, for really being instrumental in recommending this topic to begin with. as part of their business support for their membership. And as ACCA as well is on that trend of rethinking sustainable business. So thank you so much to our partners, BCCI. Thank you to Tricia, who has so eloquently and been able to navigate the panel discussion and the program so very well. Thank you so much for that. I would also like to thank Shelley and Misha for their opening remarks on behalf of both BCCI and ACCA. To each of our presenters, Dr. Emily Gaynor Dickford, Philip Julian, Ronelle Dethorne Baird, Patrick Kingston, each in their own way adding their piece, their valuable piece to this very important topic. I would like to thank the teams at BCCI, Valerie, Shanice, for their work in contributing to putting this together. Our team at ACCA, Paula, Aisha, for support in troubleshooting, as we've had some issues with the technology. It doesn't always work in our favor. So I am Maria Bleasdale, as I said, and I would like to thank you very much for your time today. And you should be receiving this recording within the next 5 days. We also have asked Emily to send us the CSR framework so that we can also send that to you with the recording and any other information that the presenters wish us to send out. We will also do that as well. So you should be receiving a feedback form at the end of this recording, and we invite you to please respond. Thank you so much and enjoy the rest of your evening.